The growing unease. The early autumn sun cast a soft golden light over the quiet suburban neighborhood where Tyrell and Mia Jefferson had made their home. Their two-story house was modest yet cozy, with a small front porch where Tyrell often sat in the evenings, watching the leaves rustle in the breeze. Life had finally started to settle for the Jeffersons after the birth of their son, Noah. At 6 months old, Noah was an energetic, bright-eyed baby who seemed to fill the house with laughter and warmth. But lately, something had disturbed that warmth, something Tyrell couldn't ignore. Every time his mother-in-law, Diane, visited, Noah's demeanor changed dramatically. Normally cheerful and easygoing, he would become tense and clingy, and the moment Diane approached him, he would begin to cry uncontrollably. It wasn't just a fussy whimper. It was a full-throated wail, filled with what Tyrell could only describe as fear. At first, Tyrell dismissed it as a phase. Babies, he knew, sometimes reacted unpredictably to new faces, strong perfumes, or loud voices. But this felt different. There was a pattern to Noah's reactions, a consistency that unsettled Tyrell. Each time Diane visited, Noah's reaction intensified, and Tyrell's sense of unease grew alongside it. Mia, on the other hand, was quick to dismiss Tyrell's concerns. She adored her mother and found it hard to believe that anything could be wrong. "He's just going through a phase, Tyrell," she would say whenever he brought it up. "Lots of babies cry around people they're not used to. Remember when he wouldn't let your sister hold him?" "But it's not the same," Tyrell argued, trying to put his feelings into words. "He cries with such fear. It's like he's genuinely terrified of her." Mia would only shake her head, brushing off his concerns with a soft laugh. "You're overthinking it. Mom adores Noah. She talks about him all the time, always asking about when she can babysit." Tyrell tried to let it go, tried to convince himself that he was reading too much into it. After all, Diane had never been overtly hostile to him. Their relationship was cordial, if a bit strained, but there had never been any outright animosity. And yet, every time Noah reacted the way he did, Tyrell's instinct to protect his son kicked in stronger than before. The tension came to a head one chilly Sunday morning. Diane was scheduled to visit for lunch, and as Tyrell watched Mia prepare the house, he felt a knot of anxiety settle in his stomach. He didn't want to ruin the day, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As Diane's car pulled into the driveway, Tyrell noticed Noah start to squirm in his arms. The baby's face twisted with apprehension, his little fingers gripping Tyrell's shirt tightly. Diane stepped out of her car, her usual polished self, her silver hair perfectly styled and her outfit carefully chosen. She carried a large, brightly wrapped gift, no doubt another present for Noah. "Mom's here," Mia called out cheerfully, moving to open the door. Tyrell braced himself as Diane walked into the house, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "Hello, my darling," she cooed, reaching out her hands to take Noah. But the moment she drew near, Noah's face crumpled, and he began to wail, his small body twisting in Tyrell's arms, trying to turn away from her. "Oh dear," Diane said, her smile tightening. "Still not used to Grandma, are we?" Tyrell held Noah closer, his jaw clenched. "He was fine before you got here," he said quietly, but his words were drowned out by Noah's cries. "Let me try," Mia said, reaching for Noah and attempting to calm him. But even in his mother's arms, the baby continued to cry, his tiny hands reaching out toward Tyrell as if begging to be held by him. Tyrell's heart broke at the sight. This wasn't normal, he was sure of it. The way Noah clung to him, the way he reacted whenever Diane came near. It was more than a simple case of fussiness. It was fear, and it was visceral. "Maybe he's just tired," Mia said, trying to soothe both Noah and her increasingly tense husband. "He didn't nap much this morning." "Or maybe he just needs to get over it," Diane added, her voice laced with a touch of irritation. "Babies can sense anxiety, you know. If you're too overprotective, Tyrell, he'll pick up on it and become more fearful." Tyrell didn't respond, but inside, he felt his anger simmer. Diane's dismissive attitude only fueled his suspicions, and he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something deeply wrong here, something he needed to uncover. After an awkward lunch, during which Noel remained inconsolable until Diane left the room, Tyrell decided he had to get to the bottom of this. He couldn't keep ignoring his instincts, and he refused to let his son continue to suffer in silence. That evening, as he and Mia put Noel to bed, he brought it up again. "Mia, I'm serious," he said, his voice low but firm. "I think there's something more going on here. I don't know what it is, but I can't ignore it anymore." Mia sighed, exhaustion and frustration clear in her eyes. "Tyrell, what do you want me to do? She's my mother. She's Noah's grandmother. She loves him." "Does she?" Tyrell asked, his tone harsher than he intended. "I've never seen her show him any real affection. It feels like she's just playing a role, like she's going through the motions." "That's not fair," Mia snapped. "She's trying. Just because she's not warm and fuzzy doesn't mean she doesn't care. You know, she had a hard life. She doesn't show emotions easily." Tyrell ran a hand over his face, feeling the weight of the argument press down on him. He knew this conversation was going to strain their relationship, but he couldn't hold back any longer. "Mia, I'm not saying she doesn't care about you," he said softly. "But Noah, he's telling us something. Babies don't cry like that for no reason. I think we need to listen to him." Mia shook her head, visibly hurt. "I can't believe you're accusing my mother of, what exactly? Of scaring our son on purpose." Tyrell hesitated, unsure of how to express the depth of his concerns. "I don't know what I'm accusing her of. I just know that something's not right." They sat in silence for a while, the only sound in the room being Noah's steady breathing from his crib. Finally, Mia spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "One more chance," she said, her tone pleading. "Give her one more chance. Let her babysit him tomorrow while I'm at work. If he's still upset, we can talk about other options. But please, don't judge her so harshly. She's my mother, Tyrell." Tyrell nodded reluctantly, though his heart remained heavy with doubt. "Okay," he agreed, his voice filled with resignation. "One more chance, but I'll be watching closely." As they settled into bed that night, Tyrell found himself unable to sleep. The weight of his promise loomed over him, a silent reminder of what was at stake. Tomorrow, he would keep his word and give Diane one more chance. But deep down, he knew he had to trust his instincts, even if it meant confronting an uncomfortable truth. The next morning, as Mia left for work, Tyrell found himself alone with Diane and Noah, his eyes never leaving his mother-in-law as she moved around the house. Diane seemed unfazed, going about her tasks with her usual efficiency. But Tyrell's watchful gaze was unwavering, his mind racing with thoughts and fears he couldn't quite put into words. He was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Shadows of doubt. The morning began quietly in the Jefferson household. Tyrell went about his usual routine, making breakfast and mentally preparing himself for what he anticipated would be a tense day. Mia had already left for her shift at the hospital, leaving Tyrell alone with Diane and baby Noah. This arrangement was part of the one more chance compromise Mia had suggested, a chance for Diane to prove that Tyrell's suspicions were misplaced. But Tyrell's mind was far from at ease. As he stood in the kitchen, waiting for his coffee to finish brewing, he could hear Diane in the living room, softly humming as she arranged Noah's toys. The sound grated on him, each note adding to the knot of anxiety in his chest. He didn't understand why, but something about her presence felt off, like a dark cloud casting a shadow over their home. The sound of Noah's soft babbling drifted into the kitchen, momentarily calming Tyrell's nerves. He walked into the living room to find his son lying on a colorful play mat, his little hands reaching for the toys overhead. Diane was sitting cross-legged beside him, watching him with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good morning, little one," Tyrell said, crouching down beside Noah and giving him a gentle tickle. Noah squealed with delight, his chubby arms flailing in excitement as he looked up at his father with adoration. Diane's gaze lingered on Tyrell for a moment before she cleared her throat. "He certainly is attached to you," she said, her tone laced with something Tyrell couldn't quite place. Tyrell forced a polite smile. "We spent a lot of time together these past few months. I'm lucky to work from home part-time, so I get to see him grow every day." Diane nodded, but her expression remained unreadable. "Well, it's important for him to form bonds with other family members too," she said. "After all, he'll be seeing quite a lot of me if you and Mia are serious about me helping with childcare." Tyrell's jaw clenched. "We're still figuring things out," he replied, trying to keep his tone neutral. He didn't want to escalate things, but the idea of Diane becoming a regular presence in Noah's life unsettled him more than he cared to admit. Diane seemed unfazed. She leaned over and gently stroked Noah's cheek, her fingers lingering just a little too long. Noah's face scrunched up, and Tyrell noticed a flicker of discomfort flash across his son's eyes. Noah turned his face away, his tiny hands reaching for Tyrell as if seeking refuge. "Looks like he wants his dad," Tyrell said, scooping Noah up and holding him close. The baby immediately relaxed, snuggling into his father's shoulder with a contented sigh. Tyrell couldn't help but feel a surge of protective pride. He knew he was reading into things, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Noah was trying to tell him something. Diane watched the exchange with an inscrutable expression, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "You know, Tyrell," she said after a pause, "babies go through phases. They can be very particular about who they're comfortable with at certain stages. I'm sure that's all this is." Tyrell didn't respond, but inside, his frustration simmered. This wasn't just a phase. He knew his son's cries, his body language, his reactions. This was different. This was fear. As the morning wore on, Tyrell did his best to stay nearby, never straying far from Noah and Diane. He found himself watching her closely, scrutinizing her every movement, every expression. Was he being paranoid? Was his own history with Diane clouding his judgment? He hated to admit it, but there was a part of him that felt resentful toward her, a resentment born out of years of subtle slights and unspoken disapproval. The first real red flag came when Tyrell excused himself to answer a work call. He was hesitant to leave Noah alone with Diane, even for a few minutes, but he knew he couldn't hover all day without raising suspicion. He told himself it would only be a short call, just enough time to handle a quick issue with a client. As he stood in the hallway, phone pressed to his ear, he kept one eye on the living room, straining to hear any sounds from within. At first, everything seemed normal. Diane's voice floated out softly, accompanied by Noah's occasional gurgles. Tyrell tried to focus on the conversation with his client, but his mind kept drifting back to his son, a persistent worry gnawing at him. Then he heard it. A sharp, panicked cry pierced the air, cutting through his thoughts like a knife. Without a second thought, Tyrell hung up the phone and rushed back into the living room, his heart pounding. He found Diane standing over Noah, who was lying on his back, wailing in distress. Diane's hands were hovering awkwardly in the air, as if she didn't know what to do. When she noticed Tyrell, she quickly stepped back, her face a mask of feigned concern. "Oh, he just started crying out of nowhere," she said, her voice unnaturally calm. Tyrell knelt beside Noah, gathering him into his arms and soothing him with gentle whispers. The baby's cries began to subside as he clung to his father, his tiny fingers gripping Tyrell's shirt as if afraid to let go. "What happened?" Tyrell demanded, his voice sharper than he intended. Diane shrugged, her expression carefully blank. "I'm not sure. I was just playing with him, and he suddenly got upset. Babies are unpredictable, you know." Tyrell's eyes narrowed. He didn't believe her, but he knew better than to press the issue directly. He needed proof, something concrete to back up his suspicions. He couldn't go to Mia with nothing but gut feelings and vague accusations. Throughout the rest of the day, Tyrell found himself growing increasingly vigilant, his senses heightened, every small interaction between Diane and Noah taking on a new significance. He watched as Diane picked Noah up, her grip just a little too firm, her face void of the warmth one would expect from a doting grandmother. There was something clinical about the way she handled him, as if he were an object rather than a beloved family member. The final straw came in the early afternoon, when Tyrell noticed a strange mark on Noah's arm. He had been changing Noah's diaper when he saw it, a faint red mark, almost like a bruise, on the soft skin of his son's forearm. Tyrell's stomach twisted. He knew babies could get bruises easily, but this felt wrong. He didn't remember seeing it that morning, and Noah hadn't had any accidents. The mark was small, barely noticeable, but it was enough to set off alarm bells in Tyrell's mind. He gently touched the mark, causing Noah to wince slightly, his little face scrunching up in discomfort. Tyrell's heart ached at the sight, and he felt a surge of anger bubbling up within him. "Diane," he called out, his voice laced with barely restrained fury. Diane appeared in the doorway, her face a picture of calm innocence. "Yes, Tyrell." "Do you know anything about this?" He gestured to the mark on Noah's arm, his eyes fixed on her. Diane's expression didn't falter. "I have no idea," she replied smoothly. "Babies bruise so easily, you know. They're always moving and bumping into things." Tyrell gritted his teeth, resisting the urge to snap. He didn't believe her, not for a second. But without concrete evidence, he was stuck in a frustrating limbo. He couldn't accuse her outright, not without risking a rift with Mia. But he also couldn't ignore the signs that something was terribly wrong. That night, after Diane had left and Noah was safely asleep in his crib, Tyrell sat alone in the living room, his mind racing. He couldn't keep ignoring his instincts, couldn't keep brushing off his son's distress as mere coincidence. He needed to do something, but he didn't know where to start. As he sat in the dimly lit room, his thoughts swirling, an idea began to form. It was drastic, something he never thought he'd consider. But he was desperate, and his priority was protecting Noah, no matter the cost. The next day, Tyrell would set up a small camera in the living room, discreetly hidden among the books on the shelf. It would capture everything, every interaction, every small gesture. If Diane was truly hurting his son, he would have the evidence he needed to confront her and, if necessary, bring it to Mia. With a heavy heart, Tyrell rose from the couch and made his way to the nursery, standing over Noah's crib as he watched his son sleep. The baby's peaceful expression was a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within Tyrell's mind. "I'll keep you safe," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "I promise." As he turned off the nursery light and closed the door, Tyrell knew there was no turning back. Whatever secrets Diane was hiding, he was determined to uncover them, for Noah's sake and for the sake of his family. The silent witness. The following morning dawned with a chill in the air, a subtle reminder that autumn was settling in. Tyrell could feel a similar chill deep in his bones, a sense of impending dread that he couldn't shake. Today was the day he would put his plan into action, the day he would start gathering evidence. He had never imagined he'd be in this position, surveilling his own family, but his priority was Noah, and he was willing to do whatever it took to protect his son. Before Diane arrived, Tyrell carefully positioned a small camera on the bookshelf in the living room, camouflaging it among a few old novels and picture frames. It was angled to capture the entire room, including Noah's play area and the couch where Diane often sat. The camera was discreet, barely visible among the clutter, and he was confident Diane wouldn't notice it. This was his silent witness, the only way he could capture the truth without confrontation. As he finished setting up, Mia came down the stairs, already dressed for her shift at the hospital. She gave him a warm smile, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. "Thank you for giving Mom another chance," she said, kissing his cheek. "I know it's been tense, but I really believe she's trying." Tyrell forced a smile, not wanting to reveal his plan. "Of course, I just want what's best for Noah." Mia's face softened, and she reached out to touch his arm. "He's lucky to have a father like you, and I'm lucky to have you too." Tyrell's heart ached with the weight of his secret, but he simply nodded. As much as he wanted to believe Mia, he couldn't ignore the warning bells in his mind, the gut feeling that something was terribly wrong. Soon after, Diane arrived, punctual as always. She greeted Mia with a tight hug, then turned to Tyrell with a polite nod, her expression cool and composed. Tyrell couldn't help but wonder if she sensed his suspicion, if she was aware of the silent animosity brewing between them. As Mia left for work, Tyrell stayed back for a few minutes, watching as Diane settled into the living room with Noah. She picked him up, her grip firm but careful, and gave him a quick, impersonal kiss on the forehead. Now, little one," she cooed, though her tone lacked warmth. "We'll have a nice, quiet day, won't we?" Tyrell felt his jaw tighten. He wanted to say something, to confront her, but he held back. He needed to stick to his plan, to let the camera capture everything without interference. After a few minutes of observation, he excused himself, pretending he had work to do in his home office upstairs. In reality, he was watching the live feed on his phone, monitoring Diane's every move from a distance. The morning passed slowly, every minute stretching out as Tyrell watched Diane and Noah interact on the screen. At first, everything seemed normal. Diane played with Noah, arranging his toys and encouraging him to grab them. But there was a detached quality to her actions, a lack of genuine affection that only fueled Tyrell's suspicions. Around midday, things took a troubling turn. Tyrell watched as Diane picked Noah up and carried him over to the couch. She sat him down on her lap, holding him firmly as she spoke to him in a low, almost harsh tone that he couldn't quite make out. Noah squirmed, his little face scrunching up in discomfort, and Tyrell could see the fear in his son's eyes even through the small screen. Diane's expression was chilling. Her face was blank, devoid of any warmth or tenderness, her eyes fixed on Noah with a steely intensity. She reached out and pinched his arm, not hard enough to leave a mark, but enough to make Noah whimper. Tyrell's fists clenched as he watched, his heart pounding with rage and helplessness. "Stop crying," Diane muttered, her voice barely audible through the feed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Noah's whimpers grew louder, his tiny hands reaching out as if begging for comfort. Tyrell's heart shattered at the sight, but he forced himself to stay calm, to let the camera do its job. He couldn't storm in now, not without blowing his cover. He needed to gather as much evidence as possible to make sure there was no room for doubt when he finally confronted Diane. Over the next hour, Diane's behavior grew increasingly unsettling. She continued to handle Noah with a cold, mechanical precision, as if he were an object rather than her grandson. She ignored his cries, letting him wail in her arms without any attempt to soothe him. At one point, she even set him down on the floor and walked away, leaving him to cry alone while she busied herself with something in the kitchen. Tyrell could feel his patience wearing thin. He wanted to rush downstairs, to snatch Noah out of her arms and tell her to leave, but he knew he had to be smart about this. If he confronted her now, she would deny everything, and Mia might not believe him without proof. He had to wait, to endure this torture for the sake of his son. By the time the afternoon rolled around, Tyrell's anger had simmered into a cold determination. He watched as Diane prepared to put Noah down for a nap, carrying him up the stairs and into the nursery. He had positioned a second camera in there, hidden among the stuffed animals on the shelf, to capture any interactions that might take place out of sight. Diane placed Noah in his crib, her face expressionless as she adjusted his blanket. Noah looked up at her with wide, tear-filled eyes, his small body trembling as if sensing the tension in the air. Diane leaned over, her face inches from his, and murmured something that Tyrell couldn't hear. Then, to his horror, she placed her hand on Noah's chest, pressing down just enough to make him gasp for air. It wasn't enough to hurt him, but it was enough to scare him, to assert her control in a way that sent a shiver down Tyrell's spine. Go to sleep, she whispered, her voice cold and unfeeling. Stop crying, or you'll make me very angry. Tyrell's hands shook as he watched the screen, his heart racing with a mixture of fear and fury. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. This was no longer a matter of suspicion or paranoia. It was abuse, plain and simple. Diane was tormenting his son, using subtle acts of intimidation to assert her dominance, and Tyrell was helpless to stop it. But he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't allow this to continue. He had enough evidence now, enough to confront her and protect Noah from any further harm. The footage was chilling, undeniable proof of Diane's true nature, and he would use it to ensure she never came near his son again. As soon as Diane left the nursery, Tyrell raced downstairs, his mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. He didn't care about being subtle anymore. He was done playing games. He would call Mia, show her the footage, and make it clear that Diane was not welcome in their home ever again. When Diane noticed him standing in the living room, his face flushed with anger, she raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Is everything all right, Tyrell?" she asked, her tone sickeningly sweet. Tyrell clenched his fists, struggling to keep his voice steady. "No, Diane, everything is not all right." She blinked, her expression shifting to one of feigned innocence. "I don't know what you mean." Tyrell took a deep breath, his voice trembling with barely restrained rage. "I mean that I've seen the way you treat my son. I've watched you hurt him, intimidate him, terrify him, and I'm done pretending everything is fine." Diane's face hardened, her eyes narrowing as she realized he was serious. "You're being ridiculous, Tyrell. Babies cry, they fuss. That doesn't mean I'm doing anything wrong." "I have proof," he said coldly, watching her reaction closely. "I have everything on camera. Every time you hurt him, every time you ignored his cries, every cruel word you whispered to him. I have it all, and I'm not afraid to use it." Diane's composure faltered, her face paling as she processed his words. For a brief moment, Tyrell thought he saw a flicker of fear in her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a look of steely defiance. "You think anyone will believe you?" she sneered. "Mia would never take your side over mine. I'm her mother. She knows I would never hurt her child." Tyrell took a step forward, his gaze unwavering. "Then I guess we'll see, won't we?" Without waiting for her response, he pulled out his phone and called Mia, his heart pounding as he prepared to tell her everything. Diane watched him with a mixture of anger and desperation, her facade crumbling as she realized the gravity of the situation. As Tyrell waited for Mia to pick up, he felt a surge of relief wash over him. This nightmare was almost over, and he would finally be able to protect his son from the woman who had haunted his family with her hidden cruelty. When Mia answered, Tyrell took a deep breath, steadying himself for the conversation that would change their lives forever. A heartbreaking choice. As the phone rang in his hand, Tyrell felt the weight of what was about to happen pressing down on him. He knew this call would change everything, not just for him and Mia, but for their entire family. The truth he had uncovered was a dark and painful one, but there was no turning back now. His son's safety was his only priority, even if it meant tearing apart the fragile bond that held their family together. Finally, Mia's voice came through, cheerful and unaware of the storm brewing on the other end of the line. "Hey, honey, how's Noah doing?" "I'm about to take a break, so I thought I'd check in," she said, her voice laced with warmth. Tyrell's voice came out shaky, his anger tempered by sadness. "Mia, we need to talk. It's serious. I need you to come home right away." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "What's going on? Is everything okay?" Her voice, once cheerful, now held an edge of worry. "No's fine, but—" Tyrell hesitated, the words catching in his throat. "I found out something about your mom. I think it's best if you come home, and we talk in person. I have something I need to show you." A tense silence hung between them. "I'll be there as soon as I can," Mia said, her voice quiet and trembling. As he ended the call, Tyrell felt his stomach twist with dread. He knew Mia would be devastated. She loved her mother, despite their differences, despite the subtle disapproval that had colored her marriage with Tyrell. She had always looked for the good in people, especially in her family. He could only imagine how painful it would be for her to confront the truth about her own mother. When Mia arrived home half an hour later, she looked pale and anxious, her eyes wide with concern. She dropped her bag by the door and hurried over to Tyrell, her gaze searching his face for answers. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tyrell took a deep breath, his heart aching as he looked into her eyes. "Mia, I need you to sit down. This isn't easy for me to say, and it's not going to be easy for you to hear." Mia sat down on the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Tyrell sat beside her, reaching out to take her hand. He could feel her trembling slightly, and he wished he could spare her the pain he was about to inflict, but there was no other way. "I set up a camera in the living room," he began, choosing his words carefully. "I know it sounds extreme, but I've been concerned about the way your mom treats Noah. I felt like I needed to know the truth, to see if what I was feeling was real or if I was just being paranoid." Mia's face grew pale, her eyes widening in shock. You were spying on my mom," she whispered, her voice a mixture of disbelief and hurt. "I was protecting our son," Tyrell replied, his voice firm but gentle. "Mia, I wouldn't have done it if I didn't feel like something was seriously wrong. I've watched Noah cry every time she's near him, seeing him cling to me like he's afraid. I couldn't just ignore that." Mia looked down, her expression conflicted. I don't know what to say, Tyrell. This feels wrong. But if you're telling me there's something I need to see, then show me." Tyrell nodded, his heart heavy as he pulled out his phone and navigated to the footage. He pressed play, and together, they watched the events of the day unfold on the small screen. At first, Mia seemed tense but skeptical, her eyes darting between the screen and her husband, as if searching for an explanation that didn't involve betrayal. But as the footage continued, her expression began to shift. The cold, clinical way Diane handled Noah, the indifference in her eyes as he cried, the moments when she ignored his pleas for comfort. It was all there, laid bare in stark detail. Mia's face paled as she watched her mother press down on Noah's chest, just enough to startle him, just enough to assert a quiet, menacing control. By the time the video ended, Mia was shaking, her eyes brimming with tears. She covered her mouth with her hand, her shoulders trembling as she tried to process what she had just seen. "No," she whispered, her voice broken. This can't be real. My mom would never. She would never do that to him." Tyrell reached out to hold her, his own heart breaking as he watched the woman he loved shatter before him. "Mia, I know this is hard. I know you don't want to believe it. But I've watched her with him, and I've seen things that make me sick. She's not the woman you think she is, not when it comes to Noah." Mia pulled away, her face crumpling with pain and confusion. "But why, Tyrell? Why would she do this? She's his grandmother. She's supposed to love him, to protect him." Tyrell shook his head, struggling to find an answer. "I don't know, Mia. Maybe it's resentment, maybe it's something twisted inside her that she hides from everyone else. But I know one thing. I can't let her near him again. Not after this." Mia buried her face in her hands, her shoulders heaving as she sobbed. "I trusted her. I let her into our home, into Noah's life, and all this time. She was hurting him. I don't know how to handle this, Tyrell. I don't know what to do." Tyrell wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close as she cried. He wanted to take away her pain, to erase the betrayal that had torn her heart apart. But he knew there was no easy way out of this, no way to soften the blow. All he could do was be there for her, to offer her the strength she needed to face the truth. After a while, Mia's sobs began to subside, and she pulled back, wiping her eyes with trembling hands. She looked at Tyrell, her expression a mixture of sorrow and determination. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tyrell took a deep breath, steadying himself. We have to tell her the truth, Mia. We have to confront her, make it clear that she's not welcome in our lives anymore. She can't be around Noah, not after what she's done. Mia nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a quiet resolve. You're right. As much as it hurts, you're right. I can't let her near him again. I can't let her hurt him. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their decision settling over them like a heavy shroud. Tyrell knew this was only the beginning, that the confrontation with Diane would be painful and complicated, but he felt a glimmer of relief, a sense of peace that came from knowing they were doing the right thing. That evening, they called Diane and asked her to come over, their voices carefully controlled. Diane seemed surprised but agreed, unaware of the storm that awaited her. Tyrell and Mia prepared themselves, bracing for the confrontation that would change their family forever. When Diane arrived, she greeted them with her usual composed smile, but Tyrell could see a flicker of unease in her eyes. She sensed something was wrong, but she had no idea just how much they knew. Tyrell and Mia sat across from her in the living room, their expressions grim. Diane looked between them, her smile faltering as the silence stretched out. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice tinged with nervous laughter. "You both look so serious." Tyrell didn't waste any time. He pulled out his phone, opening the video and setting it on the table in front of her. "Watch this," he said, his voice cold and unyielding. Diane's face paled as she watched the footage, her composure slipping with every passing second. When it ended, she looked up at them, her eyes wide with shock and a hint of anger. This isn't what it looks like," she stammered. "I was just trying to discipline him. He's been so fussy lately, and I thought—" "Stop," Mia interrupted, her voice shaking with rage and betrayal. "Don't you dare lie to us. We saw everything. I saw you hurt my son, scare him, intimidate him. I trusted you, Mom, and you betrayed me. You betrayed Noah." Diane's face twisted, a mask of defiance replacing her earlier shock. "You're overreacting, Mia. Babies cry. Sometimes they need a firm hand, someone who won't coddle them like you and Tyrell do. You're raising him to be weak." Tyrell's fists clenched, but he held himself back, letting Mia take the lead. He knew she needed to confront her mother, to say the words that would sever their bond once and for all. "You are not welcome in our lives anymore," Mia said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "I can't believe I ever trusted you with my son. I can't believe I let you into our home." Diane's face hardened, her eyes cold and unfeeling. "Fine," she spat. "If that's how you want it, then I don't need you or your family. But don't come crying to me when you realize you're too weak to raise that child without my help." With that, she stood up, grabbed her purse, and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed through the quiet home, a final punctuation to the end of their relationship. As the silence settled over them, Mia collapsed into Tyrell's arms, her body racked with sobs. Tyrell held her tightly, his own heart breaking for the woman he loved and the pain she had just endured. But in that moment, he knew they had made the right choice. They had protected their son, and they had freed themselves from the darkness that had tainted their lives. And as they held each other in the quiet of their home, Tyrell felt a glimmer of hope. They would rebuild, heal, and move forward together, stronger than ever before. Picking up the pieces, the days that followed Diane's departure were filled with a heavy, oppressive silence. Even though she was gone, her presence seemed to linger in the air, a ghostly reminder of the betrayal that had shattered the Jefferson family. Tyrell and Mia did their best to create a sense of normalcy for Noah's sake, but the pain lingered, raw and close to the surface. For Tyrell, the confrontation had been both a relief and a burden. He felt an immense weight lifted from his shoulders knowing that his son was safe, that he had done what he needed to protect his family. But he also knew that Mia was struggling, caught between the love she had for her mother and the harsh reality of the woman Diane truly was. Mia's sadness hung over the house like a cloud, and Tyrell found himself grappling with the helplessness of watching his wife suffer. The first week was the hardest. Mia hardly spoke, retreating into herself as she processed the trauma of her mother's betrayal. She would go about her daily routines in a daze, her eyes vacant as she cared for Noah and tended to the house. Tyrell did his best to support her, giving her space when she needed it and holding her close when she sought comfort. But the silence between them was a painful reminder of the wound that had yet to heal. One evening, as they were sitting together on the couch after putting Noah to bed, Tyrell finally broke the silence. "Mia," he said gently, reaching for her hand. "You don't have to go through this alone. I'm here for you, whatever you need." Mia looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and gratitude. "I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't know how to make sense of any of this. I feel like everything I thought I knew about my mom was a lie." Tyrell squeezed her hand, his heart aching for her. "It's okay to feel that way. You've been through something terrible, something no one should have to experience. But we'll get through this together. We'll rebuild, one step at a time." Mia nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "I just keep thinking, was there something I missed? Were there signs that I ignored? I feel so guilty, Tyrell. I let her into our lives, I trusted her with Noah, and I didn't see what was right in front of me." Tyrell pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as she began to cry. "Mia, none of this is your fault. You wanted to believe in her because she was your mother. You wanted to see the best in her. That doesn't make you weak, it makes you human." Mia sobbed quietly against his chest, her fingers clutching his shirt as she released the pain she had been holding inside. Tyrell stroked her hair, murmuring soothing words as he tried to ease her heartache. He knew that healing would be a long and difficult journey, but he was determined to stand by her side through it all. Over the next few weeks, they began to take small steps toward healing. They established new routines, focusing on creating a safe and loving environment for Noah. Tyrell took on more responsibilities at home, giving Mia time to process her feelings and find her footing again. Slowly, the silence between them began to lift, replaced by tentative conversations and shared moments of vulnerability. One evening, as they sat together watching Noah play on his mat, Mia reached over and took Tyrell's hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Thank you," she said softly, her eyes brimming with gratitude. "Thank you for protecting Noah, for being there when I couldn't see the truth. I don't know what I would have done without you." Tyrell smiled, his heart swelling with love. "We're a team, Mia. We're in this together. And as long as we have each other, we'll be okay." Mia leaned her head on his shoulder, a sense of peace settling over her. For the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that they could move forward and rebuild their family stronger than before. But as they continued to heal, an unexpected development forced them to confront Diane's presence once again. One Saturday afternoon, Tyrell was in the backyard with Noah, watching him toddle around on the grass with unsteady steps. Mia was inside, tidying up the kitchen, when her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced down at the screen, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the sender, Diane. Her hand trembled as she opened the message, the words blurring as she read them. "Mia, I know you're angry with me, but I'm still your mother. I deserve a chance to explain myself, to make things right. You can't just cut me out of your life. I've sacrificed so much for you, and this is how you repay me. Please, let's talk." Mia's heart raced as she stared at the message, a mixture of anger and confusion churning within her. Part of her wanted to delete the message, to ignore it and move on. But another part of her, the part that still yearned for closure, felt compelled to respond. Taking a deep breath, she typed a reply. "Mom, there's nothing to explain. I saw the way you treated Noah. I saw everything. There's nothing you can say that will change what you did." The response came almost immediately. "Mia, you're overreacting. I was only trying to help. You've always been so sensitive, and now you're passing that weakness on to Noah. He needs discipline, not coddling. Mia's hands shook as she read the message, her anger flaring. She had hoped for remorse, for some sign that Diane regretted her actions. But instead, all she saw was deflection and blame. "I don't want you near my family ever again," she replied, her words firm and final. "You're toxic, and I won't let you hurt my son or Tyrell. This is goodbye." After sending the message, Mia turned off her phone, her heart pounding with a mix of relief and sadness. She had finally severed the last tie, closing the door on a painful chapter of her life. But as she looked out the window at Tyrell and Noah, she knew that she had made the right choice. That evening, she told Tyrell about the messages. He listened quietly, his expression somber as he held her hand. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Mia nodded, though her eyes were filled with unshed tears. "I think I am. It hurts, but I feel free. For the first time, I feel like I can move forward without looking back." Tyrell wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. "You're stronger than you know, Mia, and I'm so proud of you." In the weeks that followed, they continued to build a new life together, one rooted in love, trust, and resilience. They began to open up to friends and family about what had happened, finding comfort in the support of those who cared for them. Each day brought small moments of healing, small steps toward a future free from the shadow of Diane's betrayal. Mia returned to work with a renewed sense of purpose, finding solace in her role as a nurse and the opportunity to help others. Tyrell focused on his architecture projects, pouring his energy into designing spaces that felt warm and inviting, spaces that embodied the love and safety he wanted for his own family. And as they watched Noah grow, his laughter filling their home with joy, they knew that they had made the right choice. The pain of Diane's betrayal would always be a part of their story, a scar that would never fully fade. But it was also a testament to their strength, a reminder of the lengths they would go to protect the ones they loved. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Mia turned to Tyrell, a soft smile on her face. "I think we're going to be okay," she said, her voice filled with quiet conviction. Tyrell reached over, taking her hand and intertwining his fingers with hers. "I know we are." They sat in comfortable silence, their hearts filled with gratitude for the life they had built, the love they had fought to protect. And as the stars began to twinkle in the sky above, they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. For Tyrell and Mia, the journey of healing was far from over. But they had each other, they had their son, and they had the strength to overcome anything. And in that moment, under the vast expanse of the night sky, they found a sense of peace that had eluded them for so long. They were a family bound not by blood, but by love, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to one another. And that, they knew, was all they needed. Embracing the future, 1,500 words. As autumn turned to winter, a sense of calm settled over the Jefferson household. The cold winds and bare branches outside seemed a fitting symbol of the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Inside their cozy home, Tyrell, Mia, and Noah found solace in each other, slowly building a life free from the shadows of the past. It had been months since Diane's departure from their lives. Although her absence left a deep scar, it was one that Mia was learning to live with. She was no longer haunted by guilt or doubt. Instead, she was filled with a newfound strength, a resilience forged by the painful truths she had faced. Her family had become her sanctuary, a source of joy and comfort that she hadn't fully appreciated until now. For Tyrell, this journey had been transformative. He had always been protective, but this experience had deepened his commitment to his family in ways he hadn't anticipated. His love for Mia had grown stronger, more grounded in trust and mutual respect. Watching her navigate this painful journey had filled him with admiration, and he found himself grateful every day for the life they were building together. One crisp Saturday morning, Tyrell decided it was time to create a new family tradition, something that would symbolize the resilience and love that had brought them through their darkest days. As he sat in the kitchen, sipping his coffee and watching Mia and Noah play by the window, an idea began to take shape. "Hey, Mia," he said, setting his mug down and walking over to them. "I was thinking, why don't we plant a tree in the backyard?" Mia looked up, a smile spreading across her face. "A tree?" "Yeah," Tyrell said, his voice soft with emotion. "Something that will grow with us, something Noah can look at one day and know that it's a part of our family, a symbol of everything we've been through and everything we're building." Mia's eyes sparkled with tears, and she nodded, her smile widening. "I love that idea, Tyrell. Let's do it." The next weekend, they drove to a nearby nursery, searching for the perfect tree. After browsing for a while, they settled on a young oak, its slender trunk and small branches filled with potential for growth. Tyrell and Mia exchanged a glance, both sensing that this tree would stand as a testament to their journey, a living reminder of the strength they had discovered within themselves. Back at home, they spent the afternoon digging a hole in the backyard, taking turns with the shovel as Noah toddled around, his laughter ringing through the crisp winter air. Tyrell couldn't help but smile as he watched his son's delighted expression, feeling a warmth that chased away the lingering shadows of the past. As they placed the young oak into the ground and filled the hole with soil, Tyrell wrapped an arm around Mia's shoulders, pulling her close. Together, they looked at the tree, its branches swaying gently in the winter breeze, a symbol of the life they were nurturing. "It's perfect," Mia whispered, resting her head on Tyrell's shoulder. "Just like our family," Tyrell replied, his voice filled with quiet pride. From that day forward, the oak tree became a central part of their lives. As spring arrived and the first leaves began to sprout, Tyrell and Mia found themselves spending more time outdoors, watching as the tree grew, just as they were growing together. Noah took a special interest in the tree, often toddling over to it and touching its bark with a look of wonder on his face. In those moments, Tyrell felt a deep sense of peace, a gratitude for the simple joys that filled their days. The pain of the past hadn't vanished, but it had softened, replaced by the knowledge that they had emerged stronger, closer, and more resilient than ever. One afternoon, as they sat beneath the oak tree, Mia turned to Tyrell, her eyes thoughtful. "Do you think we should tell Noah about everything that happened when he's older?" she asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Tyrell thought for a moment, considering her question. "I think, when he's old enough to understand, we should tell him. He deserves to know where he came from, to understand the challenges we faced to protect him. But I also want him to know that he's safe, that we did everything we could to make sure he grew up surrounded by love." Mia nodded, her expression softening. "I want him to know that too. I want him to understand that family isn't about blood, it's about love, loyalty, and the choices we make to protect the people we care about." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Noah play with a few small stones he had gathered from the yard. Tyrell's heart swelled with pride as he looked at his son, a boy who had been the catalyst for their transformation, the reason they had fought so fiercely for their family's safety and happiness. As the years went by, the oak tree continued to grow, its branches spreading wide and strong, its roots digging deep into the soil. The tree became a beloved fixture in their backyard, a silent witness to their lives and the changes they experienced. It was there when Noah took his first steps, his small fingers brushing against its bark for balance. It was there when they celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and countless other milestones, each one a testament to the love and resilience that bound them together. And it was there on a warm summer evening, several years later, when Tyrell and Mia found themselves sitting beneath its branches once more, watching as Noah, now an energetic 5-year-old, played in the grass nearby. "Do you remember the day we planted this tree?" Mia asked, leaning her head against Tyrell's shoulder. Tyrell smiled, his eyes fixed on the sturdy trunk and the lush canopy of leaves that now provided them with shade. "I do. It feels like a lifetime ago." Mia nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "I never would have imagined we'd come this far. There were days when I didn't know if I'd ever feel whole again, when the pain of losing my mother felt too heavy to bear. But now I feel at peace. I feel like we've built something beautiful, something lasting." Tyrell took her hand, his heart swelling with pride and love. "We have, Mia. We took something broken and turned it into something strong. We created a family that will stand the test of time, just like this tree." Mia looked at him, her eyes brimming with tears. "I couldn't have done it without you, Tyrell. You were my strength when I couldn't find my own. You were the one who protected our family, who gave us the chance to build this life together." Tyrell brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle. "And you were my courage, Mia. You gave me the strength to fight for what mattered, to protect the people I love. We did this together, and I wouldn't trade a single moment of it." As they sat beneath the oak tree, watching their son play and feeling the warmth of each other's presence, they knew that they had finally found the peace they had been searching for. They had weathered the storm, faced their darkest fears, and emerged stronger, bound by a love that nothing could break. For Noah, the oak tree would always be a source of wonder, a fixture in his childhood memories. And one day, when he was old enough to understand, Tyrell and Mia would tell him the story of their family, a story of resilience, love, and the sacrifices they had made to keep him safe. They would tell him about his grandmother, about the painful choices they had to make, and about the strength it took to protect him from harm. But more than anything, they would tell him about the love that had held them together, the love that had carried them through even the darkest moments. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the yard, Tyrell and Mia shared a quiet smile, their hands entwined. They had come a long way, and there was still so much life ahead of them. But as they sat beneath the oak tree, surrounded by the love and peace they had fought so hard to create, they knew that they were ready for whatever the future held. For Tyrell, Mia, and Noah, the journey wasn't just about survival. It was about growth, about building a life rooted in love, resilience, and hope. And as they looked toward the future, they knew that they would face it together, as a family bound by a bond that nothing could break. They were a family, strong, unbreakable, and ready to embrace whatever lay ahead.